Good evening. This is Defacto Review, a weekly analysis of Mongolia's latest political, economic, and social issues by economist and columnist Mr. D.Jargalsaikhan.
Good evening.
And I'll be your co-host, Tikshirult. Today's topics are on whether the Mongolian market is entering a bear market, the release of IPOs by commercial banks, and whether or not Mongolia will default on its debt. So, as we can see, it's a lot of economic issues this week.
This week happened to be only on economic issues because in terms of politicians, political life in Mongolia, August, as many other capital cities probably in the world, are very not busy. Ulaanbaatar city is empty. Countryside, all the roads are filled with tourists. So that's why we select particular economic issues happen last week in Mongolia.
So lately we've been hearing a lot of phrases like crypto winter, bear market, bull market, and a lot of people don't exactly know what all of those words mean. So a bear market is when a market experiences prolonged price declines. It typically describes a condition in which securities prices fall 20% or more from recent highs amid widespread pessimism and negative investor sentiment. The National Statistics Office reported that 246.6 billion turuks worth of securities were traded in the first half of this year. This is 60.2% lower than over the same period last year, meaning that the economic activity in Mongolia decreased by more than half. The Mongolian Stock Exchange, for example, decreased by 57.6% compared with the same period last year. So this inactivity inevitably leads to a drop in the prices of securities, which we know leads to a bear market. In contrast to our current situation, Mongolia was in a bull market for most of last year. For example, the stocks for the beverage company IPO tripled between 2020 and 2021. Compared to its peak last year, IPO stock is worth 30% less currently. So, given the state of the economy, do you think that we are currently experiencing a bear market?
Well, it's good news that we can talk about bear market and bull market. The story is very interesting. In 1991, first our stock exchange, Mongolian Stock Exchange, was founded. And the main function was to sell state-owned enterprises assets. And as a result, Mongolia had to have a stock exchange, which were to sell the vouchers that was given to every citizens in the country, and each voucher was representing a certain share of former state-owned enterprises. So as a result, today, after 30 years, Mongolians talk about this sensitive issues for economy for many developing countries. So through the behavior of the stock market, we can say the health situation of Mongolian economy. Yes, in fact, we are completing now a bull market, and bear market is coming. I agree with that definition. Because, as you said now, the market capitalization went from 5.9 trillion MNT at the end of last year. Today it's only 5.1 trillion MNT, almost 900 billion MNT shrunk, but still it is 10% of Mongolian economy. Usually it was around only 5 to 4%. So in Mongolian economy, if you take the Mongolian economy and the financial market, then money market or banking asset was almost 95, 97%, and today we have finally capital market around 10% of the economy. Yes, it's shrunk, and also because last year was a booming year for. It's one of the fastest growing stock market. Even it was in the list of emerging market by FTSE Russell's group. They list the emerging markets to watch. That means many institutional investors, those who are investing in emerging market stocks, which usually way higher than the average international market. So we were at once last year even in that watch list. Looks like not anymore now, because market capitalization decreased and the other reasons. And also you have mentioned about APU shares. This is the largest alcohol producer, though it also produces some milk products. But the funny thing was, APU alone, with 2 trillion MNT market capitalization, was alone 40% of Mongolian stock exchange.
Wow.
So this means, this says many things. The largest market mover is alcohol. So that means we need to diversify a lot. We need to bring more capital market money to the economy. And then the companies like alcohol producing company will be not the largest. There are other companies in the country. There are many listed companies, but not in Mongolian stock exchange listed. The largest Oyu company is listed, for example, in Toronto and London, for example. So we do expect more participation of capital market into financial market of the country. And last year growth was also, and this year again it went down, because the last year the policy rate of Mongol Bank was about 6%. Historic low. It used to be way almost close to 15, 16. And because they have put this policy rate to 6% down, the commercial bank is supposed to give more loan to the market, which was not much the case, because the saving, following the policy rate, the saving rate went down. And people were not interested anymore in saving, which was around almost 16, 18% before. So many people run away from saving account to capital market. They have rushed. That's one of the reasons why capital market had grown so much. Market capitalization grown up.
Same thing applies to the crypto market in Mongolia as well.
Well, crypto market is another driver. Happened last year again in Mongolia. You know, having 19 trillion MNT in saving account of all commercial banks, the people spent around 2.2 trillion MNT for coins. And probably per capita, we have 400,000 traders of the coins. Wow. But this coin total value went from 2.2 money spent, now way down. Market capitalization of coins probably 5-6 times less. So Mongolia is in a very verge of different coins market, stock market, bonds, then the banking. But however, all those show that there is a big activity of Mongolians towards the capital market, and it's a good sign.
Well, then, in the case that we head into a bear market in the near future, how long do you think that it would go on?
Bear market, where we do already see the substantial decrease in prices, in transactions. For the first half of this year, the transactions were 60% less than last year. And remember, last year was a COVID active time. And that means people were running away, as I said, from the banking market. But depending on how much the economy will survive or revive, how we call it, and depending on all other ingredients of our market, for example, logistics, and now the inflation, price of food because of the war in Ukraine, etc. Until the economy is becoming a bit recovery, this process will continue. You know, the National Statistics Committee have not yet published the second half, the first half of the year statistics. Second quarter is not yet published. It will be published August 17th. Then we will see if there is a second quarter is again minus. We had the first quarter minus, second quarter is minus, then we are coming to the kind of recession, that one can say. So it may go depending on how much the economy will be recovering from the COVID.
Speaking of the banking sector, let's move on to the issue of IPOs, the IPO launches of commercial banks in Mongolia. So there was a lot of buzz in May about the IPO launches of commercial banks. A law was passed that required five of the largest banks in Mongolia to go public by June 30th of this year. However, with the economic problems that our country is going through at the moment, and with the advice of the International Monetary Foundation, this deadline has been extended until June 30th of next year, leaving these banks enough time to offer their shares to the public. So ever since this news was announced in early June, this was even discussed on the Defacto review in June, there hasn't been that much talk on the issue. What is currently happening with the launch of these IPOs?
Well, very interesting thing is happening. Commercial banks, some of them were ready to issue IPO, initial public offerings. Then suddenly this politicians started to make a noise that this AQR of commercial banks have not made properly. IMF was supporting it. So at the end, they have decided to postpone all things for another year. The whole idea was banking is to be more transparent. It needs to be owned by more shareholders, not one or two. So by the end of June next year, it is supposed to have at least 5 owners, as one shareholder is not to exceed 20% of commercial banks. On one side, it sounds very pragmatic and very right. But on the other side, the timing is, and in particular, this change is a surprise. Why? Because it is a matter of asset quality review, quality itself. It is to be made by international independent auditors. And the IMF find it is not enough because some banks may have assets of quality of which way higher than in reality. In this case, it will be very bad take for new buyers of shareholders if they buy something, believing that this for higher value, and then it's turned out to be smaller value. So that's one concern. But there are already some private investment banks are created in Mongolia. People are ready, more or less, those who has money, more or less ready to buy shares. And according to, there is a Mandal Future Growth Fund, one of the first kind of this in Mongolia, and who had collected a lot of private money, who were eager and ready to buy many shares, and things postponed now. They have not in a very easy spot there now. And one of their managers said that 5 top banks are in process of doing AQR. However, 40 loans of each of the banks are particularly investigated as they cannot check all their loans. So there are 40 in each will be picked up and checked. Another good information, he said that a return on equity of those 5 commercial banks, top commercial banks, are from 16 to 25%. With such a high return, it means that if you buy shares of those banks, you will make enough that much money, which is way higher than any commercial bank saving interest rate they give now. The other news was Han Bank, for example, the largest commercial bank, who is serving 2.2 million customers out of 3.3 million population. This bank made the largest amount of profit for the first half of this year, which is 225 billion MNT. This is the highest one, and another news of another big bank, State Bank. State Bank is owned by a state. It is consisting of buying out by this state several commercial banks bankrupt before, like Anod Bank, like Zos Bank, etc., Hatagdamj Bank, etc. So it's a combination of those state bailout banks. And this state bank made first time their checking account balance increased for 30%. And net profit is grown for 2.3 times and made 73 billion MNT. So the question comes, how come for last year and for the first half of this year, Mongolian commercial banks making so much money and profit? The question is also because, one, I said first now, the Mongol bank increased the policy rate from very low 6% to now 10%. So it certainly helped them to attract more money to the commercial banks, their banks. Secondly, during the COVID, Mongolian government had two strong programs. The previous government had 5 trillion MNT support program, and the current government had 10 trillion MNT. This is almost half of the budget money in the form of support, help, assistance, grant. For example, grant for senior people, school lunch or daily, the monthly money for children, etc. So a lot of money come to the economy, and all of them have gone through these commercial banks. In particular, Ham Bank, which really has the largest branches and outreaches every part of the country. So that's the reason why commercial banks made so much money last year.
So you've mentioned the amount of money and the high amount of profits that these banks are accruing. And would you say that these banks are ready to launch or ready to offer their shares to the public? And what kind of impact do you think that it would have on our economy?
When they will do IPO, and they will do, looks like many people will buy. I think the capital market capitalization of MSC will be way higher, expected at least 20% growth, or another 1 trillion. It will make it back into 6 trillion level of market capitalization of Mongolian Stock Exchange. So I think it is. But the issue really, I'm asked to buy shares or not of those commercial banks. Now the issue comes, how good is their public, how good is their governance, bank governance? Because, for example, the major shareholder of Trade and Development Bank under investigation. He recently released from his 2-month arrest, and it was the same case before, but still this criminal case is going on. So the other some owners of commercial banks are now, one, for example, in litigation with Mongol Bank. The other is in the company that had a very secretive deal about the railway project, etc., etc. So I think before buying shares of those commercial banks, these are the questions that the future investors will ask. So let us see whether they can do it or not. Will they achieve the goal of fundraising or not? So it's a question of time.
Definitely. Let's go to our third and final topic. There have been a lot of chatter on the issue of debt in Mongolia. This is a major issue that has been noticed around most of Asia, as reported by Bloomberg and CNBC. Aggregate debt in Asia has risen from 25% before the pandemic to 38% now throughout the continent. The countries most at risk from rising debt levels driven by inflation and tightening financial conditions are Laos, the Maldives, Papua New Guinea, and of course, Mongolia. Sri Lanka, as we know, has defaulted on its debt repayments. The Economist Intelligence Unit, which is the research and analysis division of The Economist, predicts that Mongolia will be reliant on new debt inflows this year and next to meet interest payments at a time when its access to financing may be constrained by high inflation and the risk of currency depreciation. In regards to these reports, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Jargalsaikhan, has said that Mongolia will unequivocally not default on its foreign debt. First and foremost, could you please explain to the audience what needs to go wrong for a country to default on its payments?
Well, what is the financial default of a country? It is when a country cannot pay either interest or the principal of their loan on time. They don't pay on time twice, then the bond will become very cheap, and people will run away from the bond and they will sell. And this is not good for a country because first they have not met their obligations, commitment. Second, they cannot raise any more fund on the foreign market. The government bond we talk about. Once the government cannot raise money abroad, then the individual companies, individual commercial banks, they cannot. So it's a very important issue, and the government should not announce default. And as you said, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Jargalsaikhan, very profoundly said that we will not be in default. And his argument is also one must listen to. He says that Mongolian economy, Mongolia has $33.8 billion USD foreign debt, a quarter of which, 8.5 billion, belongs to Mongolian government. And this 2/3 of this whole sum is accumulated since 1991. Long-term, short-term bonds, or government bond. And the foreign debt of Mongolia was, debt to GDP ratio was 79% in 2016. But today it's only 50.8%. He has a good point. Because debt to GDP ratio was just 5 years ago 79%. Today 50%, he says. And also average interest rate before 2016 was 5.8%. Now only 3%. But it is not because we have been paying all debts. Mongolia has been all the time paying debt with new debt. The bond payment with new issuing with new bond. So the government did. For example, they had issued 2 Century and Nomads bond with more cheaper interest rate. And they have paid partially, for example, Chinggis bond balance. And this year, Mongolia will pay 137 million only dollar out of 1.5 billion USD of Chinggis bond. They have paid before that, raising these 2 money through these 2 bonds. It was when it was a good time for bonds. And also, in 2023, Mongolia is to pay 533 million US dollar bond, Grega bond balance. So according to Minister of Finance, it will not have any problem, he said. Now, also because in spite of COVID, all this, the budget revenue is coming fully. Surprising, isn't it? The economy is like this, but budget revenue is coming on time and everything is okay, he said. And plus, by today, Mongolia had exported 11 million tons of coal. Coal is almost 40% of our export earning. And this is 6.7% increase on year-on-year base. And the second, another 40% of our Mongolian export is copper concentrate. We have sold 856,000 tons this year, so for the first half of the year, which is 14% up compared to last year, the same event, the same time. That's why, according to Minister of Finance, this year there will not be a budget amendment, which frequently happened before. So, debt to GDP ratio in Mongolia is 220. He said Singapore, meanwhile, Singapore has 420. UK has 3 times more than economy, the debt, government debt. Japan is even more. Why do they not fall? No, because every money they use out of this foreign debt, they use it in very effective manner, which is not the case of Mongolia. For example, now, last week, Mongolian government had decided to investigate what happened exactly, or what we have done with this Chinggis bond since 2012. And what we know so far is this was given as a loan through the Development Bank of Mongolia, and 50% of the loan of that bank are bad loans, almost cannot be paid back. So that's the situation, and still Mongolia can raise money. We have raised so far since 2012 from international market $5.2 billion through bonds. And the largest one is Chinggis bond, 1.5 billion. So now the government, though it's very late, they want to really investigate what had happened with this Chinggis bond proceeds, and through this Development Bank of Mongolia, many corrupt cases appeared to be. That's the government decisions. However, I'm not sure that if they can achieve their goal, because many governments have tried it before, and it's somehow completely disappearing, the noise, in particular before election or after election. That's what is in Mongolia about foreign debt.
That is all for this week. This has been Defacto Review, a weekly analysis of Mongolia's latest political, economic, and social issues by economist and columnist Mr. D.Jargalsaikhan.
Thank you very much for watching us as usual. We come every Sunday night with this kind of news and analysis of what happened in Mongolia in social, political, and economic life. So see you next week at this time. Thank you.
Good night.